Yeah, that's a good point, Scott.
You
Yeah,
know,
it's.
do we need guides? Do we need Virgil to take us through?
We need time. You just need time and the ability to stand before a piece and try to understand.
Take 29.
Where are we going to start?
Are we ready?
Yes, we
Yeah.
are.
All right, I'm rolling.
All right. We left off, Vivian, you were going to talk about the,
Hold on a second. There's one light not on.
There's a break. We're rustling just ever so slightly.
Okay.
Yeah, just so you're not rustling.
Do you want me to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Okay, we're good.
ready?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, I'm rolling.
All right. When we left off, Vivian, you were talking about how people came in on the first floor and their experience of Albert Block and the issue of how we perceive his later work and his spiritual journey. Those topics were where we left off, and you said something about those things in your own inimitable way. Can you just pick up?
Well, first, I'd like to begin by speaking about the work, my perception of the late work, and then we can move on about the experiences that I've had with clients coming in to look at the work. But for me, the most extraordinary aspect of the late work is that it is a complete distillation, I think, of what his life, his journey, the whole spiritual quest. That he was a man that was wanting to give you the ideology and the philosophy, but not making it necessarily an easy task, as was his life. I think he was a man that had hardship, but within this hardship, there was the spiritual questing that is involved in such an undertaking. Everything that he has set about to achieve within his art is a full reflection of who I believe he was as a painter, as an artist, as a poet. And the late work for me, or the later work, because there is that kind of pejorative with the late work, is an absolute wonderful amalgamation, a palimpsest for his entire journey. Deeply moving, very layered, and not completely accessible at first glance. And like the figures who were these hooded, guide-like creatures, you must guide the viewer, as you must first guide yourself to understand. And it forces you to delve very deeply into who you are as a spiritual human being, how that can be incorporated in his imagery, and also some extraordinary art historical referencing that he is also incorporating in these images, which I find very humanistic and very powerful. For me, being a student of the art history of it all, understood the power of the monumentally hooded forms that recall early Italian Renaissance, the Renaissance figures of Giotto, of Cimabue, of Masaccio, and that is the most elemental and powerful aspect of let's say, the fusion of pure Christian thought, in a sense, spiritual Christian thought, the spirituality perhaps of a Saint Francis, devoid of all the trappings and all the later the later excesses that you find within the so-called Christian rubric, and just seeing it for its purity, its elemental approach. I mean, the Scrovegni Chapel at Padua of Giotto speaks to us like a block. Really, when you think about it, you need to understand this art history, and of course that's why there are times where you must guide someone through what perhaps you should try to see. I never force anyone to say you must feel this, you must see this, but you put the sources together, and once you see the source, it becomes irrefutable, Then indeed this is all part of his own, of Bloch's own artistic design, that he was really searching to give you a very elemental, a very powerful experience. And I think his life, his oyster-like reclusion in the second half of his artistic life, let's say Germany perhaps could have been the first, and then America and the Midwest and Kansas was the second. He was a monk. He was a person who really became reclusive in order to come inward and have a spiritual quest, like any person that of that ilk would want to do. And these paintings are very direct and very emotionally charged response to what he chose. He basically did away with everything else of life that was to him extraneous. And for me, they're a tad more recondite. You know, you have to really get into a dialogue with your client to make them understand and to hopefully reach within themselves to get to that point and understand that we are not giving them a line either, that we are very much invested in the work because we would not have exhibited it downstairs. And we tried very much to keep the show, in a sense, pure, that we had to show the early work, the in a sense, the more accessible, the Blue Rider connotations with the later work, the one that is still now somewhat debatable even by the art historians who write about his work and really support him and the strength that he's had as a painter throughout his career.
Stand by 1 second. 1 second. Excuse me. That was rustling. It slipped down a little bit. When we poked it, it kind of.
Did I do that?
Well, you kind of hit right with.
Rolling. 2 seconds here. And we're ready.
What are some of the problems for viewers of Albert Bloch's work that you've encountered in terms of the accessibility, recognizability of his work, how the viewer approaches it, how they respond to the work?
Well, I think accessibility is a very important issue when it comes to Albert Bloch and his work, because the subjects are not necessarily recognizable at first glance, and people perhaps don't know how to respond to his harlequins and pierrots. It really probes and warrants greater understanding, greater time, greater patience to engage them and truly trace what he's doing in these works, his melding, his conflation of abstraction and representation. A work such as Nacht 1, which is behind me, and I don't know if you have it on film there, is an excellent example of that, simply because, for me, it's as though he's stretching abstraction to the very edge, the elasticity of it, but without succumbing to pure abstraction. There are still signs of representation in this painting and in his work. And I think that does help with accessibility for people because they can hold on to some forms and not get lost into complete abstraction when they approach it. Accessibility with his later work can be more challenging, I think. But if you approach his body of work as though it were a continuum, I think that helps a great deal because for me it is a continuum. The ideas, the issues, mysticism, spirituality, representation, abstraction, they all continue from his early work when he's in Munich through to his work back in America, but it manifests differently. Even in the 1930s works, with the forms, the figuration, his use of figuration, there's a relationship to perhaps tangentially regionalism. And I think that does help people to hold on to something, to understand it. But it is complicated, and understanding who Albert Bloch was and what he was about is very helpful.
And also, one of the remarks that I get is that it's dreary, perhaps. Let's look at the fact that there's this lack of distinctive coloration. So what is he doing? What is he attempting to do by really not using the color that is present in some of the earlier works? It's almost as if the colors have become, the homespun robes of the monk, shall we say. There's nothing that he wants you to grasp onto, but just to get to that source, No manipulation of any sort of extraneous emotionalism through any brightly hued color, although, with him, color was of the utmost of spirituality and purity. I mean, the colors that he used all had very, very wonderful and I again reiterate spiritual connotation, but for him, I believe that the latter work became like that homespun monk's outfit that you have to don in order to get into your cell and create your own meditation. So for me, even that needs to be approached. And I think one of the aspects that I have to deal with is a lot of, in a sense, reverse psychology, because I get a lot of resistant types that come in and say, oh, this is very dreary and not for me, I don't understand it. And I said, well, it's not for everyone, but this is what I will try to leave you with, and you of course can take whatever you want out of it, and walk away from it and still prefer the work of, the 1911, 1914. That's really fine. But and then afterwards, something shifts, and it's not too combative, but there is a shift in perception.
I have a question for both of you. I mean, it has to do mostly with what happened to Albert Bloch's art when he went to Kansas. I mean, is the later work any less important than the earlier work?
I believe that is part of the mission that we are undertaking here, that we believe it is as important as understanding the greatness of this artist, and that the one cannot coexist without the other, because if one fully understands why he was creating what he had to create in Kansas, you understand that the mission and the journey in Berlin and the absorption of those principles were so deeply felt that they had a natural end with the works that you find in Kansas.
Okay, could Albert Bloch be discovered if he hadn't done what he did? I mean, if he hadn't, could he, would he have been discovered earlier? Would his work, I mean...
Had he not been aligned with the Blau writer, would he have
Right.
surfaced today as an important modernist?
Yeah.
I think it certainly helped that he had those associations, and I think it was part of what formed his personality as an artist, and certainly informed his interest and the direction of his art. So to take one aspect of that equation away and ask what would have happened is a difficult one to answer.
But for me, the answer is that there he was, being an artist with many other artists in Germany at this period, but yet somehow through his work and through the strength and the power, he was singled out by this group of visionaries. And in itself, that is a great story.
What does it mean to equate this work of Albert Bloch's, this later work, with Kansas? I mean, what does that say? What does that mean in terms of, from the perspective of art historians and curators?
It's a signal for what's going on in the Midwest in this period. Again, the reference that was made earlier to regionalism and to what artists were producing in that area of the country, I think it's related. Although, is my understanding that Bloch did not favor regionalism and figurative representation that was being produced by figures such as Benton and Wood. There is this relationship that exists. Even when one has a contempt for something, there's still perhaps a response to it that comes out in this work.
Let me re-qualify that question. I mean, what is this journey that Albert Bloch made? What does it say about modernism?
Well, for me, the fascinating aspect that this incredibly rich material exists, it can exist anywhere, that it's the inner life, it's the working of a true genius, of a true artistic temperament, that I have to tell you that it fed him perhaps in ways that created this art, you see, by being where he was, and the absence, let's say, of a scintillating life outside of his own art was a great aid to this gentleman who already needed very little by way of sparking that inner genius. So I find that one of the great stories that need to be told, and I am formulating some ideas for exhibitions in the future, is that some of the most extraordinary visionaries that I've come across are out of the Midwest, the Southwest. There's an extraordinary artist in Denver, Colorado. I'd hope to do a show off, and one that lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they just happen. Their genius is there, and sometimes the so-called regionalist, which I call, quote unquote experience, only helps to fuel these extraordinary temperaments.
Art can exist outside of New York, and
And
that's been one of the great struggles for modernism, and
That's right.
in terms also for art history as well. We've spent so much time in the last decades focusing on 291 and the Stieglitz Circle
That's exactly
artists.
the point.
And what has happened is it's been very important that we've learned about those artists and understood what they were going through and the relationships that these intimates of the Stieglitz Circle had. But there were independents, and there were artists working and in New York, outside of New York, showing at other galleries besides Stieglitz's gallery, that were really essential to the development of American modernism and modernism in general.
Exactly.
And many of the artists in our exhibition, and Albert Bloch certainly, come to exemplify that aspect of American modernism that is now getting greater attention in scholarship, in exhibitions, and in the galleries and museums.
And we reiterate very clearly here that that is one of our own personal mission statements here as a New York-based gallery, that every exhibition that we undertake has a lot of that component within it, because you will see that we highlighted within this work also two artists from the California area. And Albert's story was even more exciting for us because it had that progression to Kansas, and there he was, painting these extraordinary images in the heartland, And here we are saying, look at this New York art world and take note that it is not just the 291 crowd. There are many other artists that need to be seen in this light.
Tell us about the exhibit and where Albert Bloch fits in. We have Marsden Hartley, Oscar Blumenauer, we have Edward Hagedorn. Tell us about how that all fits together in relation to what you were just saying about those who are outside the 291.
Well, Albert Bloch, again, is one of the foundational artists, having traveled to Munich in 1909 and exhibited in the first Blau-Reiter exhibition and working beside the Blau-Reiter artists and the Brücke artists. He came to exemplify what was the exchange between America and Germany in those years. And artists in this exhibition, such as Oscar Blumenauer, who was not a Native American, but was in Germany early on in those years and then brought his ideas and his aesthetics to America. Artists such as Konrad Kramer, who did the similar thing. He came to the United States in 1911 after having worked alongside Kandinsky in Germany. We have Marsden Hartley in this exhibition, who was truly vital to the exchange between America and Germany in the pre-war period and war period, First World War. And all of these artists in the exhibition come to represent what was going on between America and Germany before the First World War, after the First World War. Before the First World War, when American artists would travel to, again, either to Paris or to Germany, they were exposed to this incredible vanguard modernism, Picasso, Braque, Matisse, Kandinsky, Kirchner, the list is endless. And after the war, when Americans were tainted, there was great anti-German sentiment in the United States. It took champions and individuals such as Gelke Scheier, Catherine Dreyer, J.B. Neumann, to really bring German modernism to the United States, to artists such as Edward Hagedorn, who's in our exhibition, and Barbara Morgan, and to show them what was going on and to bring the great German expressionists and modernist works to this country for others to see in exhibitions at galleries and museums.
And also the interesting point of where Albert Bloch fits into this. This exhibition, in a sense, brings you back to where he was fitting in his time, because we found it extraordinarily meaningful that Arthur Jerome Eddy was one of his great patrons and promoters. And it's because it does happen that time has a way of perhaps obscuring certain people that in their day were enjoying extraordinary acclaim and acknowledgement. And basically what we wanted to do is to place him contextually within the group of people that are now, on the average, the majority of these artists with the Hartley and Blumners and Feiningers here that you see, much more accepted and completely sanctioned by the art collecting and the art historical sectors. And what we're doing is we are reintroducing him and reestablishing him through context of painting and also through the catalog to say something very simple, really, in its message. Look at this. This man was doing this at this time, being with Kandinsky, being patronized by Arthur Jerome Eddy, enjoying some of the most extraordinary exhibition history that anyone in the vanguard could have in his day. And that's what we're trying to, we are doing.
It has
Yes.
it's been an enormous and great journey for us to, in a sense, reconstruct a slice of history. And the viewers that come to the exhibition and to the gallery and those who see the catalog have had really wonderful comments and compliments for this show. And apparently we seem to have opened some eyes, not only to many on the work of Albert Bloch, but to a lot of other artists that were working in this period and were vital to the development of American modernism.
And collectors do love the concept of cachet, because when you sort of drop a name like Arthur Jerome Eddy, and it says, oh, really? So perhaps their idea perks, and they start to say, well, perhaps I should look at this artist a little bit more. And then you start feeding them all the exhibitions and all the associations, and something starts to perhaps click.
Let's talk a little bit about that cachet. Where is Albert Bloch now in the art market? Tell us about how he's fared in this gallery in terms of people willing to buy him for collections, and is his name and is his presence commanding some price in the art market? I know it's a little bit of the sublime or the ridiculous, but let's talk about it because it's important.
Absolutely. Albert Bloch's work has brought tremendous interest. We have clients and individuals calling all the time to see Albert Bloch's work now. The works that were available for sale before the show just flew off the walls, and people who have taken the time to understand them and to come to know his work understand the great value of his production, his early and his late production, and know the value of the possibility of owning one of these great masterpieces. And I think that the market is only on the rise for his work, as we have personally witnessed over the last several months.
Yes, because the paintings that have sold did command, many of them, the six-figure range due to extraordinary rarity and historical importance. And it is worth what it is paid for. And a lot of the collectors who are very seasoned collectors within the modernist American tradition do understand that we gave them the opportunity to acquire some of the most historically important and rare paintings. And we have a certain waiting list for paintings that we know will not be for sale at this point, but they just say, just in case they are, just keep us posted, and they're on standby. And it's very gratifying to know that they get it.
There's great demand for his work, and I think that's a very important sign, not only for Albert Bloch, but also for modernism and American modernism in specific.
You've talked with Anna Bloch on the phone, and tell me what you get from just your sense of what she is to Albert Bloch's work.
Anna Bloch is an incredible woman, a driving force, and it is largely because of her that our show is as wonderful as it is and has the Albert Bloch works that it does. In addition to her generosity in loaning her own works to us, she formulated a wonderful letter for us to circulate to museums, collectors, and other galleries, encouraging them to loan to our exhibition. And her commitment to Albert Bloch's work and to public exposure of it and public understanding of it is unparalleled as far as I'm concerned. She's become a friend not only to myself but to the gallery, and a driving and inspirational spirit, and I think that her commitment to this project deserves all the attention that it gets, absolutely.
Yes, for me, I believe that we all had a wonderful, I call it a generosity of sharing and spirit. She gave us complete and full trust in what we were doing, and we felt so inspired by that act that what we wanted to do is do as much as we could, because she understood our complete and total devotion to this project and to the work of Albert, and the need to have him as one of the missions of the gallery. And we like that here. This is one of the things we really enjoy and are challenged and completely also, shall we say, what is the word, benefited by in many, many ways.
It's extremely rewarding when you can share information about a painting with somebody that will help to open their eyes to what the artist was doing, what he was about, how he fits into the larger art historical context and cultural context as well. And each person that comes in and sees one of or all of these wonderful paintings that is interested and wants to learn has a unique opportunity here. We're very enthusiastic and very genuine in our enthusiasm for his work. And it's wonderful for us to be able to teach people on a one-on-one basis, and also when we have lectures and tours coming through, we can share our experiences in putting together the show with all these people and share some anecdotes about.
Yes, I think we're unique in the concept of what we try to do as well in the education front, because not very many New York galleries institute the lecture series in conjunction with our major scholarly exhibitions. The catalogs themselves are patterned after museum ideas and styles. We open our doors to all of the art groups, to sometimes a great discomfort to us, because at any given day there might be 80 people trooping through twice a day, and yet that's why we're here. And it certainly enriches this gallery, and it's the human content that is the first and foremost. That's what it's about, These shows have stories to tell, and the more that people can come and hopefully glean something from what we are attempting to do, the more gladdened we are of it. So.
I think people are very surprised when they come in and see these sort of museum quality shows, and often we hear comments like, well, you're a commercial gallery. What are you doing
all
with
the
this?
time now.
Why do you have these works? Why do you publish these catalogs?
How do you make money?
Again, it's part of the mission and part of what we enjoy doing here, and that's what makes it really all worthwhile.
Tim asked you earlier about that same issue, and that is Albert Bloch shunned the commercial art world. I don't know that he particularly was given a chance to shun museums, but this fusion of art, preservation, and education seems to me would be uniquely approved by Albert Bloch, because he was an educator, an artist, a person who wanted to preserve tradition.
Yes.
And so...
and he was poor a lot.
And he was poor. Tell us how, we asked you at the beginning, so I guess maybe we're coming around to the end maybe.
Yeah, we've got 2 minutes of tape left.
Asked you at the beginning, why are we here? How does this fit into Albert Bloch? Isn't he the guy who would never be caught dead in a place like this? How do you feel about it?
Perhaps he would respond differently if he were here right now. To see his work in this context, to see how many people are learning from it, to see how scholars benefit from understanding his work and seeing it in, next to a Hartley or a Blumner. I'd like to think that he would approve of it.
And I'd like to think that the reason why this came about in such incredibly serendipitous ways is that perhaps he's up there saying, yes, I'm going to let you have this because your hearts are in the right place.
Absolutely.
And it's basically all that we wanted to do.
Bingo.
Cut. We just got our warning light. Okay, let's roll down.
Good work.
Oh.
Thank you very much.